communication in business, pretty critical, right? So where should we start with this conversation?
You know what? I'll start with somebody asked me recently, what is a business if it can't communicate? Where does it fit? And my feeling is that it's everything for business, because it doesn't matter how good your product is or your service or even your team if you can't communicate that to other people. And then similarly, when companies start to grow and scale and somebody's idea in their mind can't be communicated to their team to get them to take that on. So how can a business do anything if you can't communicate internally and externally?
Now, with you working with large organizations, but also startup organizations, where do you see the challenges? Where is it that you see that they're making some kind of rookie mistakes where they can be improving?
When it comes to huge periods of change and growth, so you see that with scaling companies or huge enterprises, maybe they had to make redundancies, those sorts of things. There are so many. So often I find in enterprise corporations, they use terms like crucial or critical. And of course it's not, nobody's actually going to die. And there's this real, you see it at leadership level, there have been lots of conversations that have been had to get to the point before their employees know anything's wrong with it. And there's so many decisions and boardroom deep conversations, and so everything really does matter, which is great, but it really matters about the company and those people, and not necessarily the people that they're about to get rid of. Because a colleague of mine said to me a couple of days ago, they said there's no nice way to tell someone they're fired, and I don't know if I 100% agree with it. Of course no one's going to be like, great, cool. I mean, actually I do know people that have been offered redundancy and been really happy about it. If you're just straight up fired, it's not going to feel great. I do think there's a plethora of things that you can do to connect with that person. And so it's not just kind of shit news, bye-bye, off you go. So I think considering the people rather than the job role is a really big mistake that I see seen a lot. And it sounds so easy for me to say it. It sounds like a really binary thing to say, but I do see it a lot. And so then similarly at the startup level, it can happen the other way around. So we're moving really fast. We need to bring on people. We haven't necessarily considered what kind of people, what's important to us, what's the tone of the voice for the company, how do we communicate that with them? I just need a developer. So this guy's got a good resume. This woman's come from this amazing place, so let's just pump them in. But they might not be the right fit for the company. They may not be doing things the way that you want. So all of that, I think, for me is summarized as communicating with the people rather than the role or the space in the company.
Yeah. I think if I reflect on the last 20-ish, 20 plus years I've had in business, and I think about some of the great communicators that I've worked with, and then some of the ones that maybe I would say have struggled. Those ones that have struggled, a lot of it's because it's either very direct or it's very this or it's very that. And I think the people that struggle with that communication, a lot of them don't realize the impact of that.
Yeah.
Someone sends a rowdy or a rude email, someone from a senior position, then the impact of that email, just a simple email, right, can then there'll be conversations about it. It can go and impact someone's day. It can impact someone's mental health.
Yeah.
They could be left thinking about it for days, ruminating around, oh God, my boss has said this or that's happened. And that could just be a few coarse words in an email. But because it's from someone senior, that affects people. So I constantly think about this, of how to communicate with a person, because I feel like in business, whether you're communicating with a customer, someone within your team, I don't care that it's business. Everyone's got feelings and emotions. And I feel like when you bring it all together as, there's not very much difference I have with communicating with someone who's a friend or as someone in my team. There's not that much difference, other than obviously we're at work. So therefore you've got to be smart about the things you're saying, but truthful, honesty, respect, those basics, right? Yeah. but the way you land a message. I mean, I've heard in the past companies have laid off people via a text message. You're out. This has changed. This is out, or whatever. Yeah. And imagine that for your brand. It's a tough thing.
I've also, just to add to that, like, I know quite a few people, and this is more in the US than in the UK, because we're a global company, that like a Zoom firing, like 200 employees, one Zoom call, deliver the news. So it's not personal at all. Like, the text is very impersonal. At least it was sent for you, whereas here's just a general thing and all of you are fired. It's even more impersonal. And yeah, I agree with everything that you just said. And what's interesting though is that you said, the obvious things of respect, and they're not always that obvious, because there's so many moving parts to a company, and there's so many, I've got to get the things that I need done. I need to make sure that I come away, that I don't lose my job, that I get my bonus, that I can still pay my mortgage, that a lot of people under pressure don't have the luxury, if you will, to consider how to write a respectful email. I just needed it done yesterday. And so even though maybe, the non-sociopaths in the company, because there's that small percentage of people that just don't feel that emotion, which is quite high in leadership as well. But those people who do feel it, and it may be obvious, like you said, sometimes it just falls by the wayside, just gets forgotten about because of pressurizing circumstances. I was saying to you just before we started recording, the use of words like critical or crucial in business, I see so much. Nothing is. Nobody's going to die, even if you get fired and lose your job. But this is where communication is so important, because you build words like that in to a company culture and a company process, and your employees will feel that. And you'll get probably some hard-working people as a result, but the impacts are many. The negative impacts, I should say.
Yeah, I had a leader years ago who, funny enough, I had a conversation about this recently. Everything was critical. Everything was crucial. Everything has to happen now. Everything is urgent.
Yeah.
And after a few months, of that type of leadership, I just thought, when everything is critical and everything is urgent, nothing is.
Yeah.
Like, it's just business as usual. So that always just comes back to that communication style being so important. So after a period of time, because you respond to that, if someone says something's critical and urgent, you immediately respond, right? Because that's what you're like, all right, I'm here with you. I'm here with you. I will support. But when it's done every day, every week for a while, you're like, oh, this is just how they talk. You're like, okay, has no impact on me now. So you've got to be really careful with those sorts of words and that communication. It's like the boy that cried wolf.
Yeah.
Right, because eventually you're like, oh, okay, this is just how you are. This is just the way of your communication. And then in the end, it becomes totally not effective.
Yeah. It's the same as, anyone, I was going to say any child, we've all been children at some point. Anybody that has had a parent or a teacher yell at them, like shout at them for a consistent period of time, will have at some point experienced that apathy where the fear almost goes away, and certainly the meaning of the words that are being shouted just really isn't impacting or going in at all, because we can't listen to that, and it's the same when I work on companies at pitches or presentations. A lot of people have this concept or this idea that, to speak with really high energy and to kind of really kind of like a presentory voice and to kind of speak like this for the whole time. And I'm sending it up and mocking it slightly because that can work really well. But if you speak for 3, 5, 30 minutes at any level of energy, high or low, it will lose all meaning. And being shouted at is a similar thing. And using words like critical and crucial and trying to push that urgency all the time, you can't sustain being at that level of adrenaline. And so, like you experienced, it just stops. And then, I don't know, can we talk about this? In your experience then, what happened for your manager, leader that you were just talking about? Did they become less impactful across the workforce?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Because people you stop responding to the thing that they want to happen.
Yeah.
So then So in that situation, yeah, and then there's lots of communication around them. Like, oh, why are they talking like that still? Why is this so urgent all the time? So then there just ends up being a subculture of conversation where, well, actually it's just driving underperformance instead of performance, because people are now focused around, okay, well, why are we having to do this? And then that leader just gets questioned on everything.
Yeah.
And I feel like as soon as people lose trust in leadership, that's when, people just crack on with their own stuff.
Yeah.
Ultimately, people have an objective. You just focus on that objective, and then this other email just becomes noise, or that communication just becomes noise, and it just doesn't get listened to. And I think that's where I feel like we start this conversation where communication is critical. Like great communication is important. Like if you work with someone who's really great at communicating, they make you feel included and like we're on a mission, we're doing this great thing together, right? And it's normally communicated in a very clear, calm way.
Yeah.
And that's the leadership I buy into. And I'm thinking of a great leader, a guy called Ian Camino I worked for years ago. And he was so polite, but he was also so right with his communication. And it got me excited every day. And I think about like that drove my performance. It improved it because of the way he communicated.
When you say it was right, what do you mean by that?
Oh, I just felt like he was always right on the money, as in right on the money with his communication. Like he was polite, professional, but he would kind of inspire you in a way that drove you forward with something, whatever the message was, whatever we were trying to achieve, wherever we were on a particular project, or I don't know, it just kind of gave you energy.
Yeah,
That's probably what I'm looking for. So does your message give energy, or does it take energy away? Like if it's the critical, it's taking energy. Oh, I've got to do this thing. Yeah. Or is it inspiring me? Is it giving me energy to do something? I feel like that is the difference.
It is. And I think, we, so when we work with people on presentations, what often happens is people will use AI or they'll write their own, but they spent a while writing it. And so then they lose the feeling behind what's supposed to be there. So a very simple and yet kind of forefront exercise that we do is to go through and just remember, when I'm saying this section, what do I want the people to feel that I'm speaking to? And that is, throughout the whole thing. And so usually when you get to the end, the feeling is something around inspiration or motivation or energize, because so there's a study from now 2 years old that looked into first interactions and what people will remember. And it's the first 15 seconds, the last 15 seconds, and then a wow moment or a surprise moment in amongst that. And in my experience, this isn't true of just first-time meetings. It can also be the first Monday morning meeting with someone you've known for 3 years. It can be that new project and the way that the leader has spoken to you to get you to take that on board. So it's not just the first time meeting, but first time of this thing. And so, yeah, what you're noticing in yourself around feeling inspired by Ian is something that so many leaders or people want to achieve when they're delivering a message. You want to get people to come on board. And, even with our children, with our partners, you're trying to say to your partner, let's just get a babysitter and go out for dinner. We've not done it in months. You're inspiring them, motivating them to do that. With your kids, trying to get them to put their toys away, to come and spend some family time or whatever it might be. Until I don't have kids, it's still the intent is to inspire and to motivate. And we instinctively, I think, most people have the instinct to know how to use our tone, how to use our voice to be able to achieve those things if the thought is there in the first place. And to go back to your initial question around, the mistakes, if you're not considering, hey, what do I want from Simon in this moment? What do I want by the end of the messaging that I put forward on this Monday morning? Then you've dropped the ball before you opened your mouth. Or hit send on the email.
Yeah, it's such an important thing because, it made me reflect for a second so I have a 4-year-old, Logan, and I always know that if I responded, say, in a snappy way, he'll get upset by that. So, as you'd expect, if I was a bit snappy, then he would, you can just physically see it in his body. It's actually a really interesting scenario where if I was a bit snappy, he would have a upset response. Whereas my wife, who's very above the line in terms of her communication, she will use like distraction and a way of motivating him, which will kind of take him above the line. Oh, baby, we're not going to do that just now. But what we are going to do is we're going to do this, this, and this. And then we're going to go to the park a bit later. And then Auntie Leanne's coming over. And she will raise up his energy.
Right.
So I've watched her over a few years now of that's how you communicate with a child. Because what they don't respond to is pick up your toys. They don't respond to that.
Yeah.
But they will respond to an inspirational message, which is, if we pick up our toys now, we'll have time for 2 bedtime stories tonight. Does that sound good? Yeah. And now he's often motivated. And I feel like business is often similar to that. If you can get the job done better if you inspire someone to try and let's do this quickly and efficiently, because then we get this other thing. And I feel what you're talking about is, working like that with businesses at a very large level. But ultimately, if everyone can be motivated, you find another 20-30% of growth there.
100. So you just remind me of something which it's funny that I've ended up in this career in something that really frustrated me as a child was when my parents didn't do this a lot because they learned that it frustrated me. My teachers would say something like, "Because I told you to." And for me, when I did move into management and into leadership, the thing I would always try to do was take that extra sentence to explain why I need it done. Now, it's been fed back to me that occasionally people are just like, I don't need the full, because I say a sentence sometimes, I spend a lot more time explaining why, and people are like, I just tell me what you need done and I'll go and get that email done. For me though, and on the whole, if you just take that extra small amount of time to explain why and where it's coming from, then what you're doing is respecting that there is another human being, regardless of hierarchy within a company. We are both human beings. We're born the same, we are the same. And so for me to be motivated to do it, I want some personal connection to it. And depending on culture and country and business culture, that is a luxury that some people are not given. It can be very demanding and hierarchical of do it because Simon says do it. And that does work in some cultures, because we work globally. And so you go to certain cultures who are just, if they're given the option to talk and to give their opinion, it can be quite frightening. It can be, you can see a lot of freezing moments because they're not used to it. And so you can't just say one size fits all for every culture, every person, every company. At the same time, though, that person has their own personal motivations when they wake up in the morning. And if we can tap into those as a parent, as a partner, as a leader in a business, you're going to get a lot more out of people.
Yeah. It's a lot to reflect on. When you're working with businesses and you're coaching them, working with them around, what does great look like in this field? What sort of practices are you sharing with them?
So one of the things that we say in our training is there's no such thing as a gold standard. Because similarly to what I just said, then you, depending on the person or the culture or the country that you're dealing with, we can't just say, right, everybody should deliver a presentation in this way or manage a difficult conversation in this way. And so the biggest thing that we have to do at the beginning is celebrate. It sounds hollow maybe when I say it, but celebrate that individuality. So what do you bring as a manager, as a leader? What are your attributes, your skills, your personality? And so there is, for anyone who's interested in looking this up, there's a trust equation. Have you ever come across this?
No, but please explain.
It's by a guy called David Mayer, or David Meyer, depending on how you pronounce the surname. And he basically, the idea is that in order to gain someone's trust, it's an equation where you need to be highly credible, highly reliable, highly intimate, and then have a low self-orientation. I'll explain that briefly because we do it in our teaching and you sort of see people glaze over a little. So in business, having worked with thousands of people now, I often see when I talk about credibility and reliability, whether we fully understand the dictionary definition of those words, people are like, yes, of course. In business, I need to be good at my job. I need to be credible. I need to be reliable. I need to show up on time. I need to do the thing that I said I was going to do, create the product I said I was going to create. Whether that's as the whole company or as the individual, people tend to get those things. Now, they're not easy to come by. Again, like depending on gender, depending on culture, depending on where you are in the world, it can be very difficult to walk into a room of other people who are different and just get credibility. What I see a lot of people, though, is that they get that they need it. Whereas the other two elements are often forgotten in my experience. And so when we talk about intimacy, a lot of business, particularly, and it's changing in the UK, but particularly in the UK, there's this idea of, and I always do the air quotes, like being professional. And so this idea of, and you mentioned it earlier, you used the word professional when you were talking about Ian and what was great about his, but our own individual understandings of what professional is. Like, does that mean I can swear? Can I talk about my wife? Can I talk about the fact I got drunk on Saturday? Where is the line? And talking about how I went to a restaurant and I had one glass of wine or one bottle of wine too many, that is allowing intimacy. Turning up on Monday morning going, oh, I'm really hungover. Yes, that's still intimate, but you've now ruined the credibility part. So I'm now not trusting you because you're not highly credible anymore. You've been highly intimate, but not highly credible. And so a lot of times people fear not knowing this and just avoid intimacy altogether and just don't share personal things about themselves. They have their work life, their work person and their home person. And I've been in my past lives very guilty of this. And it's one of my life goals now is to be the same, whether I'm on a podcast, whether I'm with my wife, whether I'm, with my colleagues, my team. I try to be Mike and what is important to me and my values and my ways of communicating. And the self-orientation part is just the old phrase, put yourself in someone else's shoes. And to go back to, we've talked about this a little bit already today, when you're communicating with others, your thing is crucial, critical, urgent. You need this done right now. But before I send that email or walk into the room to tell you, what's Simon got going on? How was your weekend? Where's your mental health this morning? What's your workload like? Do you have capacity to be able to do this? And also in organizations, maybe where you've got two managers feeding in, what's your load from the other side? Because is this realistic to meet my crucial need? So self-orientation and intimacy are two things that I see get lost a lot. And so whilst we don't promote a gold standard, when we talk about what good looks like, it's about being able to be professional and also, be credible and at the same time be intimate, be yourself, because you're probably going to spend 5 years, 10 years, 20 years at that company. How exhausting to sort of hold your breath for 8 hours a day and get to the... And it's why culturally we have this, it's nearly 5 o'clock. It's nearly Friday. Because we're yes, working hard and we get to relax, but at the same time, we're kind of just not fully being ourselves and then just wanting to get to the weekend where we can be ourselves. And it is mentally and physically exhausting.
Yeah, because what you're describing there is almost like at 5 o'clock, a return to self, return to who you actually are, but you can't be that person during your business or working hours because got to be a certain character, or you've got to be stern, or you've got to be strong with the team, or you've got to be like this or like that.
Yeah.
And funny enough, it reminds me of a story. I was when I was in therapy years ago, and I can't remember her name now, but the lady said to me, she said, "What would it be like?" Because I described how I was at home, and she said, "Tell me how you are at work." I said, "Well, at home, I'm sort of fun, bit silly, like trying to make the kids laugh, trying to make it easier for my wife, just kind of pretty calm and relaxed and everything else." And she said, "Can you be that person at work?" And I was like, "No, don't be silly. That's ridiculous. I'm direct and I'm strong and I am this and I have to be that." She was like, "Do you think that maybe you should consider a different choice in your career?" She said, "Because you need to be the same person. Do your best to be the same person." She said, "Sounds to me like you've got an act going on at work." And I think that kind of aligns directly back to our conversation here, which is, are you your true self, or at least a closer version of it at work to who you are at home? You don't have to be the exact person, but like there needs to be some sort of link between the two. And I feel like when we talk about intimacy here, just being able to share something.
Yeah.
I had a great weekend. My football team won. I had a great weekend. I went out with my wife. I had a great weekend. Took my kids to the park. Like, that is great to share. And I feel like when you share that, it builds trust. It builds credibility because you're a real person.
Yes, yeah, that's
right?
true, yeah.
If you don't share anything at all, it was fine. My weekend was fine. Right, down to business. It's like, oh, there's something missing. I feel like what we believe in more than anything else right now at this time is authenticity. You're believing in a person.
Yeah.
What are they trying to achieve? What's your mission?
With the drive of AI, like that is coming. I'm seeing that in my clients more and more and more, that need for authenticity. So my marketing manager just told me this morning on the way here that what they're seeing is so much marketing is being put out with being created by AI, that now there is a need for marketing professionals to rehumanize the messaging. So still use it, but then go and make it flawed. So the grammar isn't perfect. There was a spelling mistake. There was some issue in it somewhere. Because apparently there's a real thirst or sort of need for that in social media engagement at the moment. That authenticity, that human element to it. And it sounds so obvious. It sounds so simple to talk about, and it isn't. And if you're turning up at work or on Zoom with that character, then that character has an agenda, have goals to, like bring in more revenue, to get higher bonuses, to, whatever those things are. And of course, then things become critical and crucial and urgent, because I'm not considering myself as a person. So I'm definitely not considering you as a person. And so it's very easy to become removed. It's the same concept that you see on, like when YouTube first came out and trolling first became a thing. The psychology behind being able to say awful, horrible things to people because they were dehumanized. They weren't having to look them in the whites of the eyes and have that moment. And celebrities see it all the time, getting really hateful things. But we can do that even when we work with people face to face. If particularly in larger organizations, we can dehumanize in fractured or smaller ways than just seeing them as inhuman. So yeah, if you got to start with yourself, you got to start by showing up the way you would like to show up. And yeah, for some people that does mean changing jobs. And one of the things that I'm qualified in is career coaching. And so as a qualified coach, you can do certificates in different areas of coaching, and that's one of mine. And post 2020, so many people wanted to consider what job they did, because life was different. I suddenly got to spend more time with my partner, or you get to spend more time with your kids. You don't have to get up at 5 a.m, go work out in the city and be at your desk by 7:30. It just sort of feels different. And as a result, my mental health's a bit better. In fact, my physical health's better, even though I'm not going to the gym as much. Why is that? And that's all to do with cortisol, like stress hormone. So there's all these things that 2020 had allow people to see an option of change. And then already by 2025, you start to see people forgetting that option and being in jobs that, well, it's just what I've always done. I can't change it. It's hard.
What do you think changed around that 2020 time? What was it that changed in people? Obviously, we were going through COVID. That's the major thing. And then we had a huge shift to, I'd never used Zoom before that moment. Not
Right.
really, especially not for regular business meetings, instead of replacing face-to-face. I remember I was working with a client at the time, very large retailer. I only ever met with them face-to-face. And then during that 2020 period, everything became online. That's fine. So we were all talking online. And I remember, because they were a very, very face-to-face meeting type organisation, and as we started coming out of 2020, I said, "Are we going to be coming back online? Are we going to be meeting often?" They said, "No, we've banned it." I was like, "You've banned it?" He said, "Yeah, it's far more productive for us to communicate with vendors like this now." And they decided just to take it out completely to save a lot of their team's time. So the only people that were invited on site was like their top one or two vendors, and everything else was a Zoom meeting. I was like, wow. So you completely changed your business in like a course of a year.
Yeah.
What do you think was changing there for people? What was the outcome of that 2020 change?
I think Zoom is a major, or conference calling is a major contributor, because, and I'll explain in a second, but I actually think it's then now flipped and become a detriment, or can do, because like you say, there was a lot of time being spent in cars, trains, planes. Also, from a sustainability perspective, like a lot of businesses either have like a head of sustainability, or they're trying, they have certain quotas as well to meet. And so it supports all of that, not having to, but it's a lot of lost time. And so suddenly, you see during 2020, actually some productivity levels really went up because you get more time. But that's what I was just talking about, is the detriment to that is I go into a lot of businesses where they don't even have a 5-10 minute break from one call to the next. And there's a couple of things there, because in terms of the trust equation, it affects my ability to see how reliable you are, because you're always late to calls. But it also shows me some levels of priority. Oh, sorry, I'm late. I was just on a call with the, director or CEO or something. So straight away, I'm like, okay, I feel less important. You have prioritized that person over me. Oh, you see it in external. I work with a lot of startups, and they will turn up late because they were on a call with an investor. Fine, their investor's going to give them money, and I'm not. But also, it still sets that tone of hierarchical like levels of importance. And so I do think Zoom had a big impact into that. I also think just having more family time, more home time, more time to just move at your pace, and the way that provided for periods of time like an increased sort of mental health like awareness. It may not have improved it for everybody, but there was an awareness of actually not having to get up at 5 a.m, not having to spend all that time on trains. Or if you live in London like I do, you often at that time are genuinely pressed against someone's sweaty armpit. And that is the start to your day. And nobody feels good in that environment. Well, I shouldn't say nobody, but so I think the freedom, I was trying not to use that word, but the freedom of access on Zoom, the freedom of time, the freedom of more nurturing time, like family time, friends time, being able to like finish at 4 on a Friday rather than, oh, great, the boss said I can go home at 4. I still get home at 6:30 because everybody's doing it, and I missed a train and because it was too busy. And so you don't actually get that enriched time with your friends or with your family because of those elements. So I think that had a really, really big impact. And I think the final thing I'll say on it is that because of some of that extra time, there was a significant number of people that started to have a little side hustle in some way. It might be really creative. It might be, if you're a developer, you could just have that other little product that you started like building, or supporting a mate's business. And suddenly you're not just 10 years of only doing the same thing. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Suddenly you're just like, oh, and this, and this, and this. And it gives you if you're doing 3 little things, suddenly you've 4x'd your experiences in a week. And so then you have the luxury of diversity of difference and think, actually, I do like my job, but God, I love doing that thing for my mate in his pub. I never thought I would want to work in a pub before, but it is genuinely the thing that's giving me the biggest life force. And me as an actor, I was acting and coaching, and when COVID happened, I was much more reflective of the days where I was getting up to do an acting job and the days I was getting up to coach. And I didn't want to do the acting days. And I really wanted to get up. I was waking up early for the coaching days. So that diversity gave people choice and freedom.
It's interesting for you, isn't it? Because you're looking at your energy and where you're kind of leaning into your natural intuition, leading into your natural energy.
Yeah.
Like, your acting wasn't giving you that same energy anymore, but coaching was. Like, what was different for you at that stage?
Oh, I'm going to start this with maybe an apology to people that are in the acting, film, theatre industry, but there are some ways of being treated that, there's an example, like, often as an actor, you'll go to a casting and the job starts in 2 weeks, but you're probably not going to get a phone call or an email to say if you didn't get it. So it's this constant just waiting, which really impacts mental health. But the way that like actors can be spoken to, because it's that thing of not considering the person and just, I'm seeing 500 people for this role today and I'm bored as a casting person. So then I'm not connecting with these people. I'm just saying, okay, next. So those sorts of things make you just, it can dampen your energy, to your point about energy. Whereas in coaching, and this isn't true 100% of the time, often you're making a difference. You're helping, supporting, guiding somebody in some aspect. And in some of those, they will really thank you very, like at the end. Some come back again, some send their friends and their family and their colleagues. And some don't say thank you, and you can see yourself, the change that has happened in them. And all of that for me was just far more purposeful than the entertaining that I was doing. And even when I did acting jobs, and I was lucky to have a few like this that were about something really important. They, I did a play about paedophilia, and it raised conversations. We had Q&As after the show, and it really helped and supported people, but I don't think an iota of what I can do now when I'm see 6 to 10 clients a day. And that's if one-on-one, if you're in a training session, you can see even more people. So yeah, I'm not being high and mighty and saying I help everybody. It's much more energizing for me to support people than to entertain them.
Reflecting on that for a second. So casting director just says next. That's the only communication, because they're seeing a lot of people that day, but that's the style of communication. Very quick, dismissive. It's got no emotional, no connection. It's the exact opposite to this trust equation, to what we've just talked about.
Yeah.
It's the next. And maybe they are very busy. And it's not my place to say that's right or wrong, because I'm not in that role. But you can definitely see the energy. What we've been talking about here is is your message inspiring someone? Look, I've got someone who's I've been coaching for a while, but this role isn't quite right for them. But we can still use that as an opportunity to say, look, these are your qualities. This is where I think you should be in your career, and this is what's going to lift you up.
Yeah.
This isn't right for you at this stage. Right, but it might be in time. But that feedback is a great growth opportunity for you as a leader, but also for the person that's receiving the message to say, look, let's work on this together. But I feel like there's something great for you, and I think this is the direction you need to go on. That's a far more better way of communicating. Maybe they don't have time for the next, like anything more than that, and I appreciate that. But everything we're talking about is that communication style. One was draining you. One is inspiring you.
I honestly think that it's more draining for you as the person saying next as well.
Yeah, of course.
If you're spending your whole day seeing 500 people, but not really seeing the people, then, you know, as humans, even introverts, you know, like, for those who don't know, you know, the definition extrovert, an introvert, like extrovert, you're gaining energy from being around people, whereas introvert, you know, you're not. Even for introverts, there's so many studies that look into what happens to the brain when we're with other people, and even Zoom can create some of that. So the synapses, you know, the electricity in the brain really like infuses when we're connecting with other people. If you're spending your entire day not connecting with other people, but still with people, I think it's really exhausting. And the other element that, you know, comes to it and is this, you know, and for those who are listening, I guess, rather than watching, you know, looking down at your phone. And so this comes into multiple industries, but it is very prevalent in the acting industry, where it's the next feeling is bad enough, but it's that I haven't even looked up at you at any point for the entire time. You've just done a whole audition and I haven't looked up. Now, it might be a phone, it might be a laptop, it might be a tablet. It's really common that sort of stuff happens. And when I work with startups, I hear about it from investors doing that. When I work in enterprises, I hear about that if people are going presenting to the board or very occasionally to C-suite. And that, you talk about energy, that kills your energy because there is no flow between two humans. It's just stopping somewhere between what you're giving out and that person's technical device. But again, it's going back to not considering the other person in that, just considering what you want and need, which is the self-orientation in the trust quotient.
Reminds me of some training. Someone came in for a training day once, and the thing that I took away from it was kind of like his kind of like main message, and I loved it because I try and reflect on it quite a lot now and use it. He said, "Wherever you are, be present." And I was like, I love that. I got shivers thinking about it actually because it just landed with me really well. And it's like the whole point. I mean, this is in business training, but it was far deeper than that, which was just wherever you are, just be there, be present.
Yeah.
Don't be on your phone and having a conversation at the same time. Don't be on Zoom and thinking about something else. Don't be on Zoom texting. He was like, make the meeting shorter, but be present. Whatever, just try and be present. And he said, because then you're going to get a lot more out of it. They're going to get a lot more out of it. You can't be at two places at the same time.
What a waste of everybody's time to have a meeting where you're not present. Like, you know, you're not going to get the key takeaways or the goals. Memory is impacted. You know, when you go away and you sort of think, what was it I was supposed to be doing for Simon? You know, your memory is impacted if you're, and we can't, people will roll their eyes at me sometimes when I say this, because I talk about it a lot. People can't multitask. So humans can't multitask. We make micro parallel decisions. So yes, I can like comb my hair and drink the coffee at the same time. But if I put the coffee down, I can probably comb my hair quicker or slightly better than in that moment, because your brain is having to like make these sort of these moments, these decisions. And so, yeah, if I'm on my phone, if I'm on my laptop, I'm checking in and out of, I might get the gist of what the person said, but I didn't get every part of it. And actually what I might have missed in the middle is them looking quite vulnerable because they picked up on me on my phone and and so then actually their energy dropped. And when I got to the end of their presentation and thought, God, they didn't seem like they were really bothered about the project they were trying to pitch to us. They were at the start, they're just not at the end, because they couldn't keep up that level of energy while you gave them nothing back.
Yeah. And in some part of their mind, they'd already qualified out. They've just thought, oh, this isn't going to work out, but I'll run through the pitch and use it.
Yeah, we rely a lot on assumptions as humans because it's a survival instinct thing, right? It's like the lion's coming. The assumption is the lion will kill me and eat me, run. So it goes back to basic instincts, and assumptions are good, but we can't always trust them. And so that person's on their phone. They might not be because they're hating the presentation, but most of my instinct is telling me, okay, I'm being boring. They don't like this. This is something more important. Should I, come back another time, or should I just not bother at all? And I think as well, a lot of times if you're presenting something, pitching something, going in and delivering some difficult information like a project delay, or it's vulnerable. There is a moment, if not a lot, of vulnerability. And if that vulnerability is not met with vulnerability, with intimacy, then fuck, it hurts. Whether you realize it or not, it chips away somewhere. I'm a very sensitive person, and so I'm usually quite aware of that chip. Whereas I think some people, you just end up leaving like pissed off, and explore why you're pissed off. And it might be that it comes back to, well, this person doesn't care about me, or they, what a waste of my time. But it's chipped something emotionally.
I often think about any meeting or presentation, if you can get it to be a collaboration, whatever it is. And I think about my sales career, and I think one of the things that probably I found kind of worked in a meeting, say I may have a meeting, whether it's Zoom or it's in person, doesn't really matter. It's just everyone does an introduction. Okay, Sally, what do you think about this project? John, what do you think about this project? Robert, what do you think? Anyway, get them to explain their position. And then as you present or you talk, you then revert back to those points that they've made. Yeah. Oh, Sally, I think this relates back to you in this way. What do you think? So your presentation or your way of communicating would be collaborative, but you're bringing people along for the ride. And I feel like you can do that in any meeting. Yeah. Like if you're truly interested in what they're saying. Also, a great way to sell to someone is to get them to buy, oh, actually, I think if you did this and this and that, and then, okay, cool. So I feel like with presentations, they should be more discussion documents instead of like, here's a slide. I think this is what it's showing us, is that we can do this, this, and this for you. How do you think that will relate to your business? Quickly turn it back. If you're a leader presenting, this is our business strategy, how do you feel you can all impact this? Does this sound like you want to be part of? The sooner you make it a collaboration and not a command and control, I'm telling you what's happening, right? People won't come along with you for the journey when you're telling someone. But if you're collaborating, if you're having a chat, if you're communicating in this way, and I think we could do it in that way, and they give your input and you give your input. That's why I loved the wherever you are, be present. It's because then you can pick up on all the nuances and everything. It's possibly one of the best pieces of advice I've ever heard.
It's, the term be present. So I agree with you. I think that's an amazing advice. And yet we get that feeling of, it's one of those terms that can lose meaning. It can lose feeling because there's a lot of mindfulness practices out there and talking about being present. And then people can hear the words without knowing, the way that's landed for you. For some people, those be like, oh yeah, be present.
Yeah, I see.
And that's what I love about when I was saying about first interactions earlier, and people will remember a wow moment or a surprise moment. If people have had a wow moment or surprise moment whilst watching this, it might have come from you, it might have come from me, it might have come from them. It might be nothing to do with anything that you and I said. It sparked a moment or a reminder. I said something earlier and it reminded you of this other trainer who'd said, be present. And that then has an impact on you for the next hour or the next day or whatever it is. And I think that stuff is really important. The being present or the use of the language, it may mean something to some people and not to others. For me, it's about curiosity. Because I can go into leaders and trainers and say, do this as a practice. Ask Sally, ask Robert, ask, those people. And for you it isn't. I can see when you're talking about it. For some leaders, that would still be a mechanic. It's something to drive engagement rather than wanting to drive engagement. And if you're genuinely curious, so where I grew up in west of England, in a town called Hereford, and there's a thing that a lot of Herefordians will do where to say hello, they'll say, "You all right?" And I grew up being facetious and would say, "Yeah, I'm good, thanks," or "Not great." I would actually answer the question, "Are you all right?" as in, "How are you?" And the number of people that were like, I'm not actually asking. Some mates would say, I'm not actually asking. And it became this thing that went on for like a year because I became really fascinated by who would actually respond, who actually meant it in the first place. And that's not a slight on Hereford. It's just a term that had come. It's a colloquial way of saying hello. Of course, the words are you all right and how are you? And in that circumstance, when you're just saying hello, there's no curiosity in it. I'm not actually asking, how are you? And I see it a lot in business. People will do the portion of a Zoom call where they'll chat about the weekend, but not because they're listening at all. And in fact, a lot of times you see it, people are still on their second screen or on their phone because they're just going through the motion of how are you and the motion of being present rather than actually being curious. If you want to know how is that person, if that drives how you feel about your day and how you interact with them in business, then you are being present, absolutely. And so will they be, because you will have grabbed their engagement whilst being. If you tell me about your newborn and I start to ask genuine questions because I'm curious, you will then want to tell me more about your newborn because you can see I'm enjoying myself listening. And you're not thinking, oh God, he's just asking, to be polite. And you're not just going, oh yeah, they're born this time ago and then stopping. You'll tell me more because I want to know more. And I think most people pick up on that energy.
Yeah. It's a funny thing, isn't it? The how are you? Mm-hmm. How are you? I'm well. You okay? Yeah. But what we're really doing, it's like a check-in, but it's not really a check-in.
Yeah.
It's how are you? I'm fine. I'm okay. But then if you actually to go, you know what? I had a terrible weekend. Like how many people actually open up at that point? And it's not many because most of the time, I'm good. I'm all right. I'm cool. Yeah. How are you? Fine.
I have a thing. I got challenged on this at the weekend, in fact. So a lot of British people, in my experience, will say fine. So you just demonstrated it and I'm fine.
That actually means bad.
Yeah.
It means I'm... Oh.
And I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I struggle with it because my empathetic brain is going, you're not fine. And you shut that down. And, I want to ask questions and be here to support. But you have to then still say, well, if they've said they don't want to talk about it, they don't want to talk about it. But it's so convoluted, actually. Because I work across multiple cultures and other cultures coming into the UK, if someone says I'm fine, you just think they're fine. You're not necessarily picking up on the nuance of, oh gosh, they're really not fine. And so that's where Zoom is a powerful thing because you get non-verbal body language. You can get the tone. You can still, fine in an email doesn't cut what you can see in someone's body language when they're not fine while saying that they're fine.
Anyone who says I'm fine, gosh, imagine if your wife says that.
Yeah.
I'm fine. You okay? I'm fine. Like, oh no, what's happened? Immediately you're thinking, okay, well, should we chat about it?
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes my wife will do that in the middle of the day and it's got nothing to do with me at all. We're lucky that we both work from home a lot. We can have lunch together sometimes. It just means I can't let you, she's saying, I can't let you open that door because I will become more upset or more angry and I've got another 4 hours of work to go through. You have to sort of respect that boundary. But yeah, it's in terms of communication, it's not very clear communication to say it.
It's almost the exact opposite, but you are just saying, it's almost, I suppose, saying, give me space.
Yeah.
Without actually saying, give me space. But I suppose the amazing thing is when you're working with these global organizations, what we're saying here, it's not even the words, it's the meaning behind the words. It's just a colloquialism of our language, of how we communicate. We all kind of know what that means. I'm fine. But then if you're dealing with someone and it's an international business or that's the funny thing, isn't it, about communication, is that you could communicate in a certain way to people that you understand and because they're local to you, but you start to communicate on an international basis, then every word can mean something completely different.
Yeah. And also, there will be, depending on someone's grasp of the language, then you can deal with like, misinterpretation. You've got certain cultures will take that very literally. Also, I learned from a company we're working with just last week that now, this is a US stat, so I don't know quite what it is in the UK, but a third of people are neurodiverse in the US now. And so then you bring in things like autism and the sort of more, not for every single autistic person, but, the more literal understanding of the word. So you've told them that you're fine. What would, why should they think otherwise? You've told them that you're fine. So all of that nuance isn't necessary. Like you said, everybody understands what it means, but not everybody understands in the moment what you're actually giving to them. And then, yes, I think when we look at managing difficult conversations, a lot of times the lack of clarity in communication is what can cause explosion. And people could think that they've been very clear because culturally to them, they are. I've told you, we've got to make cuts, but it's all going to be fine. Is it? Why are you making cuts then if it's genuinely going to be fine? And so that's just how my brain would go, let alone other people's brains.
I think that's an immediate contradiction, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because we're making cuts, you're at risk, but the business is going to be fine?
Well, exactly. Which then sends the underlying message of that's all that really matters. And I'm not going to name the organization. One of our clients went through a period of firing, and it was to save budget, and it allowed them to grow, and they've done a lot of hiring since. So it was a good strategic decision. It's actually supported more kind of employment long term. But of course, people were out of their jobs back then, and prior to this moment, it was an incredibly agile organization, very supportive, a lot of people really aligning with the values of the company and going the extra mile regularly as if it were their own business, wanting to do for the company. And there was a real dent caused by the messaging, because the messaging often left a lot of people feeling, well, that's, what really matters at the end of the day is the company. And we've always been made to feel like we really matter here. And right now it doesn't feel like that. And so, of course, people left, but the people who stayed, who were the lucky ones, some of them are, still not quite right in terms of how they feel and how included they feel. So that messaging is critical. Again, nobody's died, but the impact of the effectiveness of a company can be really ruined by the way that you communicate.
That's really what we're talking about here, is why communication is so important, and whether it's a manager to their employees or it's the business statement that's got to be made.
Yeah.
The way it's done, I feel like the big bit here, for me anyway, just a personal view, is when something lacks empathy, that's for me, then it's kind of it's a statement.
Yeah.
And that's when there's no human connection. So like, I'm always looking for a level of empathy, of understanding that the business is here and this is what needs to happen. We apologize, we're sorry, all that sort of stuff. Just a level of understanding of the person receiving the message. But the same for me in sales. You write an email, you're thinking about, how is this message going to land when I'm not going to give them the discount? Or how is this message going to land? Is it because the statement is what the statement is, but it's kind of the story that you put around it.
Yeah.
And the understanding that we're a business, we've got to make cuts, we're running out of money, the business is whatever it is. I think it's kind of, that whole storytelling piece is important. And I feel like if it's got empathy and understanding and those sorts of things built into it, it's far more personal that way. And people can understand that people are in business. Right? This business has got to make money. If it doesn't make money, if it's not making a profit, it can't use the money to reinvest. It can't use the money for training. It can't use the money for all these sorts of things, develop the products. I think people understand that, but it's also the way it's communicated.
Yeah, you just talked about storytelling, and in sales, storytelling is, the most important thing. Would you say?
Probably, yeah, probably.
But we sometimes receive clients who maybe their organization has brought them in, and we'll be talking about storytelling, and there can be this feeling of, oh God, storytelling. And what I would say is, if ever someone says, how were you? How was your weekend? What's your favorite board game? Anything that lights you up, any question where someone has asked you something and you want to talk about it, you are then telling a story after it. You are taking them through a story. So we all do storytelling. It's just about different people's leveling skill set within that storytelling. How well can we craft that story? And from this whole conversation, if people take away one thing, I would say, look into storytelling. Whether you come and do it with us or go Google it, there are only a small amount. There is a theory that there are only 8 ways to tell a story. The traditional theory is 7. So if you go Google it, it's 7 or 8 ways. And we give storytelling structures as part of our work. And actually, when you get really clinical about this and say, oh, this film or this, book or this video game, that's not one of these 7 stories. If you quiz it and question it, you're like, oh God, it is. I learned that on my first week of theatre school as an actor, and I was depressed by it. I was like, surely, not everything can come down to 7 different ways. And the more I've tested it, the more it's true. And so if we can get a grasp of what those storytelling models are, of how to bring some structure, because humans need that structure. Sometimes in a podcast, I'm sure we've both done it at some point, you can start to tell a story and then you jump back and you tell this thing because you remembered it. In doing that, you will lose or dilute the engagement of the people that are listening to it. Whereas if we take that moment, figure out what we want to say and start off down that structure, you're going to keep engagement throughout it. And I think that's in leadership. It's at any role within a company. I think it's in sales. I think it's in talking to our partners at home. If you're not considering the story, and God, there are times where I get to the end of the day and I just need to verbally process something. And I'll tell my wife about the day, and I haven't, as a storyteller, I haven't put together a well-pieced story. And you can see she's just bored because I've just word vomited, because it wasn't for her or about her. It was for me to cathartically clear out my head from the day. Now, fine, that needs to be done somewhere, but it's not her responsibility. And at the end of it, if I then want to have fun with her that evening, and I'm like, well, why does she seem so tired? Because just talked at her for 5 minutes about something she didn't even need to know. And yeah, sorry, Amy, that does happen a lot. But I think people do it at work a lot. Because there's no back-to-back, so there's a lack of breaks in between meetings. We bring the energy of one meeting, and one of your colleagues who you're particularly close with goes, oh, how you doing? Oh, God. And you're in to this word vomit, and that set the tone of what this meeting is about. Happens a lot.
7 different ways.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I know one, which is the hero's journey,
mm-hmm.
which I'm not. Most action films will go on a bit of a hero's journey. I'm aware of that, but I don't know any more.
So, what's also interesting when you look into this, if you go and Google the 7 ways, different websites will have different names for the 7 or the 8. The hero's journey is the most famous, I would say. It's the most used. So everyone will have experienced the hero's journey, from Netflix to books to video games. So that is absolutely one of them. Some more simple ones that are out there are things like Story Mountain, 3-act structure. These are things that you will have experienced quite a lot. there are things like any story that you've watched that starts and then goes back in time. Well, not any, but like a lot that go back in time are likely to be a storytelling model called in medias res, which is Latin for in the middle. So you've started in the middle, you've grabbed that moment of impact. And in business, the way that this can, if you're pitching, if you're presenting, and you create this story, and then you realize as you, I don't know, I feed back on how this project's gone over the last 3 months. And in the middle of it, I have this stat about how much impact it's had on our clients. As I write the story, I might go, you know what? That's going to get everybody in the room excited. I'm going to take it to the beginning. I'm going to open my whole pitch presentation with it. Then you've done an in medias res story. If you then have some form of structure afterwards. But you have to keep moving in a linear way. If you bounce around, if you do that thing of saying, on the train here, there were problems with the Victoria line, and then I messaged Simon. Before that, before I even realised that there were problems with the Victoria line, I was messaging Simon about something else. What you haven't done is cohesively go back in time for a reason that's engaging me. You just forgot and clumsily went back. And I'm hearing it for the first time going, what? Where do I pick up in the story? Which bit do I actually need to listen to? When do I need to put my phone down from just texting and actually engage? When are you ready to tell the story? And so I think in storytelling, in communication, one of the most important words is silence. One of the important things to say is to take time to think, what do you want to say? And then a lot of us will have, whether you've studied it or not, we'll have ways to tell a story if we've just taken that moment, considered what do I want from this person, how do I want them to feel. I think, honestly, all of my work comes down to 2 things. So I don't know if your microphone just picked that up. My stomach rumbled. I think it comes down to 2 things, which is consider your audience and how do you want them to feel. Whether that's a conversation, a presentation, a pitch, a podcast, everything. Like when you and I, what's our purpose? Like what do we want the audience who are watching this to be getting from this conversation? Is it just 2 guys chatting at each other? Is there something important? And I come on these podcasts because for me, some people can't afford what we do. And, we're going to launch a new platform in September, a learning management system that we can offer cheaper courses and even some free courses. But even beyond that, people might want some of the stuff that they can't afford the cheap courses. Well, I'll talk about some of it on podcasts and on our LinkedIn. We put out posts, 3 or 4 posts a week. And I because that's important to me. I don't want to just only have the privileged few that can afford my time. I want what I believe in communication and its power and its need to improve our communication, our storytelling. I'll, talk about it to anyone that will listen.
I love the breakdown there, which is consider your audience and then consider how you want them to feel.
Yeah.
I love that.
Because, consider how you want them to feel. It comes back to what do you want, right? So you going into it, okay, I need them to buy this thing. So how do I want them to feel in doing that? In sales, if you don't know what their problem is, then how do you know whether your product service can solve that problem? So if you've not been curious, to go back to what I was saying before, then you don't know. And if you want them to feel that there is something, if you're selling, that this is something for them, something that alleviates that pain that you've just discovered. So how do you want them to feel in order to buy the thing or to take on the project, or because you've had to fire them? Like, you don't want them to just be like, right, see you later, because there might be the opportunity to hire them back in 6 months' time. So do you want them to feel, valued and important and really skillful and good at their job so that they go on to continue working for somebody else in a really powerful way? And organizations that I know that do that with their hirings and firings get a really high return of workforce. So there's an organization we work with who they encourage people, maybe, Simon, you've reached a point where you're ready for the next promotion, but we don't have it for you. There isn't a spot open. And we're going to encourage you to go and do that somewhere else. And you go and do that somewhere else. And then you see that there's a role back here a year later, 2 years later, and you come back because you felt more valued there than you had done since you moved. So how you want that person to feel, even in shitty news situations, is imperative, I think.
Yeah. I think it is. It's in all walks of life, isn't it? How we communicate. And I think it comes back to some of the basis of just communicating in a way. So, it's a personal relationship, whatever it is. Yeah. It's a personal relationship. And that's why I feel like in today's world, we are kind of blurring the lines between work and home and those things with remote working, those sorts of things. You could have just had lunch with your wife, then you're coming to have a difficult conversation with a colleague.
Yeah.
Like that, or you're off to see a client straight away. And it's always coming back to this, you being able to communicate in an authentic way, which is kind of true to yourself, which then has that undertone of empathy and understanding and caring about the other person in the way that you communicate with them. Mm. That's why I feel like the whole communication piece needs to be really taken seriously. I know there are business leaders out there which struggle. And if so, I think it's that awareness piece, because the leaders that I've always bought into are the ones that have made me feel, engaged, empowered, like we're on this journey together. And if you're not, then it's like there's going to be no loyalty, not just to that person, but to the brand. That's why this comes back to it's such a crucial thing. So same with customers. How did they feel in that moment where you had downtime, the solution wasn't working? Well, how did you make them feel? Did you care? Did you communicate look, this has happened, but we're going to fix it and it's never going to happen again? And now you've actually made the relationship stronger, because now if you deliver upon that promise, yeah, that thing happened, but it's never going to happen again.
Yeah.
So do you really lean in at those times and communicate quite openly, or do you just hide it? Yeah, it went down, but we didn't tell you about it. And then they found out 3 weeks later through a press release by a competitor. Well, why didn't you tell me about that? I needed to know about that. That was critical to my business. Now you're angry.
That's intimacy.
Mm.
If you can't be honest and intimate, then the trust is broken. You might be able to get it back, but for me, my interpretation of the trust equation is that there's no such thing as a little bit of trust. So this is me rather than science. I think you have someone's trust, or you don't have someone's trust. And so, yeah, if you can't open up about those moments and be intimate and say, we're going through a tough time, or we fucked up, and this is how we're going to fix it, then how can I trust you in the future? Like to fuck up, yes, that maybe affects your credibility, but to have the self-awareness to say we fucked up and this is what we're going to do to fix it, that you bring back your credibility by being intimate in those moments. And so, I see a lot of damage done by what you've just described, by not sharing with clients, and you might lose by being really honest. You might lose some clients. In my experience, you're going to retain a lot more than you're going to lose.
Trust, yeah. What you just said there, I really love. You either have it or you don't. There's not like, oh, I trust that person 40%. That's not a thing. Because you're either believing that person and you trust them, or that brand. I believe in this brand. I trust this brand. There's... And you either, you fully trust them or you don't. There's no in between. And then when the trust is gone, it's gone forever. Very hard, if impossible, to rebuild.
Yeah, I think it depends on want and time, because if you think about it, like I've got friends who've lost trust in their partner. You take cheating as an example, like, can you overcome from that? And I genuinely know people that have overcome from that. but it doesn't happen tomorrow, because the trust is broken there. And you do see it, it might be suddenly I'm micromanaging you, like picking the kids up from school, and I never once screwed that up. But the trust is broken. I don't trust you as a person. And I think it can come back, but it's sort of, it needs time. And so in an organization, maybe where you lose your director's trust, but you actually only have a meeting with your director once a month or even once a quarter, it's really then going to be hard to build that back up. Unless maybe you have lots of other interactions through emails and Slacks and whatever. But yeah, time exposure to the other person is then needed to try and earn it back.
I loved our chat today. It's been great. We could chat for hours. I know, I can feel it.
Yeah.
If someone wanted to get in contact with you, learn more about what you do and your work, how would they do so? What's the best way? So
we're currently Forefront Coaching. We are going through a rebrand. So somewhere shortly after this goes out, there will be a rebrand. So I'm Mike at forefront-coaching.com. That will be Mike at forefront.co. So either of those, you will be able to find me. And LinkedIn. I mentioned a little while ago that we put out a lot of content because we're really important. It's really, important to us. We put out content where there is a sales element. Of course, every business does. It's really important to me that we put out content that's just giving. And so, yeah, if you are not ready to get in contact with us, just go check us out from a distance, because there'll be something that's useful in terms of communication for everybody, I believe.
Amazing. All right. Thanks for your time today. Much appreciated.
Thanks, Simon.